Hello, everybody. A very warm welcome to this special episode of the Bespoke Show. I am Asha Sampath, and I am joined on this show by co-host Sid Baliga. TBS, or the Bespoke Show, is a platform that aims to bring curated contemporary topics to the audience internationally. We give a special focus to orient students to industry framework. And with this objective in mind, we hold these sessions not just online, but also partner with B schools to increase the reach across the country. Sid Baliga and I are the co-hosts of this show. A brief introduction about ourselves first. Sid Baliga is an alumnus of Manipal Institute of Technology and IIM Koiko. An educationist by profession, his focus areas are early childhood education in affordable public schools and building high-quality higher secondary educational institutions. He's also an author and makes use of the power of the pen to send across strong social messages. I am a brand consultant. I'm a weird combination of a finance professional and a brand consultant. I am the founder of a marquee brand consulting firm called Brand Horizon. I'm also an independent director on the board of Toyota Financial Services and a guest speaker in business schools. Today, we are extremely delighted and privileged to present internationally renowned Dr. Jagdish Sheth, Charles Kelstead Professor of Marketing, Goisveta Business School, Emory University. He is a recipient of the prestigious Padma Bhushan Award in 2020 for his immense contribution to education. Professor Sheth is a renowned scholar and internationally recognized thought leader. He has published more than 300 peer-reviewed research papers on various topics and disciplines and over 30 books, including The Self-Destructive Habits of Good Companies, The Rule of Three, Clients for Life, The 4 A's of Marketing, Firms of Endearment, and Chindia Rising. Professor Sheth's insights on global competition, strategic thinking, geopolitics, and emerging markets are considered revolutionary. Thank you so much, Professor, for accepting our invite. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Asha.
Today's topic is retail without human touch. Is it intriguing? Let's take a quick trip down the memory lane on the journey of retail in India over the last few decades. What comes to mind from the 1980s are the kiranas or the mom and pop stores largely run by the owners themselves. They multitask at their very best. They handle just about everything, starting from writing down the orders, packaging, weighing them, writing out the handwritten invoice along with the carbon copy for their records. And sometimes they even extend help to deliver the parcel to the customers at their convenience cars. And later came the large format of retail in the form of supermarkets, which had a wider selection of products, and it added a convenience of arrangement in aisles so that customers could walk through the aisles and pick up commodities of their choice. And then evolved the departmental store concept, which had a wider range of products stored in multiple floors, and each floor was reserved for a specific product segment. And then comes the post-liberalization era in 1991, and retail evolves into a very much more mature model, and then came in large global players and Indian corporates into the retail space. This went through several refinements over the years. Fast forward today, we are in Industry 4.0, and the era of millennials and online shopping is encompassing people's lives. At the click of a button, our orders are delivered at the convenience of our homes. In this context, Professor, In one of your talks, you had mentioned about how stores have to evolve from low technology to high technology, from pure sales to value-added services. How do you see stores evolving over the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years? Will the value-added services that a retail or a physical store offer win over the convenience of e-commerce? Would they continue to sustain a competitive edge? How do you see that going forward?
I think one has to go back to the evolution of retailing itself, the brick and mortar retailing. As you know, the key thing we always talked about in retailing was location, location, location. When that got equalized by competitors, then retailers began to think about convenience quite a lot. How it is more convenient. 7-Eleven stores came about, convenience stores came as a concept. When convenience got equalized by competition, it was basically the same. Then the next thing that came out was customer experience, which is the phase we are going through right now in the brick and mortar retailing. In the meanwhile, you had this online retailing that came in out of nowhere, especially in India. So Flipkart is one of the pioneers, for example. Amazon is there. And of course, we had the same thing. In the early days of Amazon, people were very skeptical that Amazon as an online retailer, primarily serving books, basically a book online company, will become so big and will have a huge impact on the brick and mortar retailing. So what does the retailer do now? Brick and mortar is here to stay. It just needs to be transformed into something else. Fundamentally, it has to do two things. One would be to do enormous unbundling of the activities that they do and make them into value-added services, not free, but the consumers have to pay. Where can we learn about that one? We can learn from the airline industry. So today, if I fly Indigo, for example, I have to pay for my bag maybe. I have to pay for my seats, which assignment you get. I think that model is becoming very viable in retailing eventually. So today, especially with coronavirus, we are all self-isolation. So I have 2 grocery stores. I'm online. These are all brick and mortar companies. They have an online ordering system, and they deliver that within 4 hours to 6 hours. Whatever I ordered, they accept the order. It's basically online. So they're learning that delivery is an extra expense they can charge to the customer. Right now, I have no choice, but even when I have a choice, that adds a value add. The best retailer in the world at one time were Marks and Spencer, out of England, for example, way back in the 1800s. And of course, more recently was Sears. If you take the example of Sears, while Sears sold merchandise, its main profitable businesses were 2. None of them was physical merchandise. The most profitable business was credit card. Every household in America had a Sears credit card before Visa and MasterCard came in. And that credit card had 50 million household subscribers. Their net profit from the total merchandise group, 34% came from financing on the credit card, giving the credit, eventually some layaway plans. They were very brilliant about the whole thing. And the second one they did was to provide extended warranty, because they sold mostly hardware type, physical products, as opposed to soft goods like garments. So they are very famous for Kenmore Appliances, which is #1 brand, by the way, private company brand. They sold Craftsman tools. I can give you about 18 brands of Sears, world-class in quality, but they also financed it or provided extended warranty. So in a durable goods, financing becomes a very key strategy, as we do in automobiles, for example, which is also a retailing, as we do in home financing. So to me, those are the value add, including delivery, installation. I will also give a couple of examples which are likely to happen eventually. We already have one example in Hyderabad that I can talk about. The 2 examples are Home Depot in America and Lowe's, which are basically do-it-yourself. Typical warehouses, you go, Ace Hardware is another one retailer, and what they do is enormous value add by delivering at home. If I want to order any product, let's say refrigerator, they will come, deliver, install, heating, cooling, they can install. Those are all extra services. So an organized retailer has an advantage of mom and pop retailers in that regard. And ultimately, in retailing, what matters is surprisingly the supply chain, not merchandising at the store. We always think about that one, but the great retailers always had great access to good suppliers or manufacturers for that matter. Fast forward to India, and you can see in Hyderabad, I just from outside about a year ago, IKEA is a store, which is a Swedish, I think, company, and very, very successful wherever they've gone. And this was a huge, huge place from outside. It looked like maybe 50, 60, 100,000 square feet. So to me, retailers can learn how to do more and more value-add services for which the consumers are willing to pay. And I can add more stuff, but I'll wait for your question.
Yeah, sir, you made a very interesting point about value-added services that neighborhood stores can offer. Uh, but my question is here about Amazon and Flipkart, which is already delivering to the doorstep. So what happens to the mom and pop stores? I would rather sit at home and order on my app multiple times in a day rather than visit the store multiple times in a day. Will that not be the future?
It's a very good point. A very small mom and pop store in your neighborhood has to go away from the offering what we call convenience products, day-to-day necessities, which will go to online clearly, and offer products which are very unique, which means you can't get it any other place. And I'll give you examples away from the traders, provision stores in India, or cloth merchants, primarily, which are very big in Bombay. 30,000 Kachi alone traders are there. What they have to offer, and which is very possible, is offer something which is very unique that the big retailers, online retailers, don't have. We see that in India with mithai. People line up even today to go to a physical store if they're allowed, obviously, outside the lockdown right now. And people wait in line to get their mithai or nimki. The recipe is unique. So if you can offer a unique product or have a unique product made by somebody that is not available any other place is one way. And I'll give you a quick example. Most of these would be specialty brands. So for example, Samsonite in India, luggage store, they specialize and people come because of the loyalty of the brand and also now you add the services. So it's clearly one area. Second one is very strongly doing all the value-add services, which means how do you make retail experience far more pleasant, however you do it, which actually does happen from mom and pop. I have once in a while, I go with my wife to a place. And the way the sari salesperson comes, opens up saris after saris after saris, I can do that on Amazon. I cannot flip my switch on Amazon or, touch points, etc., to go after that kind of a variety. So if I'm looking for variety, truly what is called shopping, in that case, the physical retailer still has a value. The third thing is actually the old thing what the neighborhood grocery store person did. He or she had a multi-generational relationship with the customers. They did the financing also, because if you are in a working class neighborhood, you don't have a month-to-month paycheck, and because of that, the merchant says, all right, I trust you, you can pay me later on. So partly they need financing and come home, some delivery boy. In my younger days, we would have a delivery boy. We are just a working class, middle class, and they will come and take a list and do everything for themselves. And they knew our preferences. It is back to the agricultural days in America or in England where the milkman came home, the meatman came home, fresh produce was given. There is a relationship that's very important. Now, if you're a large brick and mortar retailer, let's say Big Bazaar or something like that in India, we have a very good example of Nordstrom here. Nordstrom is still doing okay, surprisingly, compared to all of the retailers. That's because they empowered the frontline retail salesperson to have a relationship so that next time I went to shop there in Nordstrom, I'll be looking for that salesperson who had the authority to go across departments and was empowered to negotiate on behalf of the customer any bureaucracy in the company. If I want to return something, they will say, I will do it for you. Where does that happen right now? Automobile dealers, which is a retailer, also happens. I go for the same salesperson. It is true for doctors in services. I want the same doctor, even though it's a group practice or a hospital. I can do the same thing at a banking place. I want to meet the same person, teller, counter. That relationship is what? You now not only build a trust, but you become a trusted advisor. That person is not selling merchandise because the person is not incentivized to sell the merchandise alone, but to create a trusted advisor. So they become my consultant. Now we have seen this in the US at specialty retailers like Foot Locker. If you go to Sears, salesperson is basically an order taker. He or she does not know the differences. But if you go to Foot Locker, everybody in Foot Locker has to be active athlete in 2 sports minimum. So they wear more Nikes or Adidas, and you go there for the advice. Which style is good for you? Consultative selling, as we call it in industrial marketing. I think that is other things. I clearly see the future of retailers selling different merchandise than what they're doing, but creating the value add.
I think the human element definitely plays a very important role. And I think so closely connected the topic is also the sensory marketing that was widely used in retail space. So I'm not sure how that will be replicated in an e-commerce model. So the touch and feel and the sense of smell, so all that cannot be replicated on a digital platform. What is your take on this part?
No, I think you're absolutely right that, and we have in the Howard Sheth theory, a whole chapter on what's called significant communication versus symbolic communication.
Right.
Most of the online would be symbolic, like television, cable, etc., print. There'll be basically only 2 senses out of 5 that we know so far. And that will be the eyes and hearing, vision and hearing. The 3 senses, if they are very critical, like taste is very critical, smell is very critical, and touch is very critical. Without touching the things, you don't get the holistic experience about the product, merchandise, whatever it is. Surprisingly, touching happens a lot more in services than you think. A doctor has to touch you. And the way she or he touches you, you know whether they have an empathy or not toward you. That's an emotive dimension. But touch is a very good way consumer judges about the empathy dimension in many ways. Smell, of course, is very important. I mean, if you want to sell coffee, it is not the taste, but the aroma that makes a difference. So Starbucks learns how to add aroma at the store, for example. If you go to a perfumery store, it's the smell that matters. I mean, I can give you examples. That's not the intent. But so wherever there is a smell as a very critical distinguishing or make choice making, wherever touch is the one that makes the difference, for example, automobile, I need to feel good by driving that in some fashion, or wherever taste is very important, which is true in all of the snack products, for example. In that case, which is why I use Haldiram as an example, Haldiram, you go and you taste things, for example, that makes a difference. So I do believe those 3 are advantages, those 3 senses, all 5 senses in many ways, because we also use the vision and the hearing at the store. But I do want to make one comment, sit on the other side.
Right.
The online platforms are becoming more and more exciting. There are 3 things good retailer, a salesperson has across selling. Salespeople are not only must be competent, is they know the merchandise they are selling you, good, bad, all the features, functions, but the salespeople should have empathy, and salespeople should have merchandise you sell. Now, if you go to ATM machines like in banks, as opposed to the teller, competency is even better than the teller. Teller will make a mistake, but the machine does not make as many mistakes or very few mistakes because on competency, it dominates. It can be done by more listening. Today with Amazon, Echo system, Alexa, for example, it's fascinating to see how much it is adaptive in artificial intelligence. And today, when I speak, they understand my accent. Right? So I can do empathy, interaction, dialogue, etc. to become a listener. As a machine, I can do that thing today with artificial intelligence. What is not there is what trying to figure out how to is passion. How can we make machines passionate? It must be not possible. I mean, ATMs look like more hospital, you know. They don't have the atmospherics, the design, etc., which says come and grab me kind of stuff. It's like just no, have it for me. So how do you create enthusiasm, as we call it, or passion? Then I realized it can be done by software. For example, the best things on machine today people do are to play video games. Video games are so exciting. People are bonding with that quite a lot, the machine. And I'll take one more quick thing. I think a week ago, Saturday, in the Wall Street Journal, in the weekend edition, there was a whole write-up by a young woman, absolutely incredible. And the title was that my girlfriend is a chatbot. Isn't that interesting? So here are people bonding with an artificial intelligence bot as if they are humans. I'm not kidding. Now they have such an interactive capability so that chat bot, it's a woman in this case, the person is the man physically. Mind-boggling, she says, I would like to go to a beach. So he drives hundreds of miles to go to the beach as if it's a real person. He asks questions, are you happy? Isn't that fascinating? And you see, if you think this is not real, these are real examples, anecdotal. I'm told in China, Microsoft has a artificial intelligence bot, 660 million users already. So don't look at America. We are way behind in technology. You've got to look at South Korea, you have to look at Japan, you have to look at mainland China. That's where all these future things are happening for whatever reason. We don't know why, but they do seem to have the infrastructure. So I think it's a matter of time before we will add emotion into the machine.
Professor, you are talking about trust and empathy that the stores can actually create. And I think the COVID-19 has actually given them an opportunity to make the difference, because when big players online, such as Amazon and Big Basket, were popping out messages saying that we are fully booked, it's the neighborhood stores that actually came to the rescue of millions of people. And they not only made sure that we were ensured essential services, but they also made sure that the products were delivered at home. So do you think this is going to be a very lasting impact on the people going forward? Because I think it's not something that we as humans easily forget. When we are at the most difficult times, the ones who help us out are the ones who get remembered long. So have they actually made the much needed impact already as a physical retailer?
You're talking about the retailers going to the road and serving the customers during lockdown, or are you talking about online retailers?
No. The physical stores. The physical stores supplying, making home deliveries during the crisis, they've actually made an impact on people's minds.
I will tell you, you're so right, which is another reason why I'm still very much in favor of small mom and pop retailers. Here is what's happening. Like in India, we have a lockdown also. Small retailers like restaurant people especially, small grocery stores, are saying that customers are not coming to me. How can I go to the customer even though I'm struggling and surviving? How can I offer my services to the community? So small retailers always tend to have more community orientation. They are very much sort of the big retail driven by primarily financial performance. So what you have is a financial outcome, but no emotive bonding. And people do remember who helped them out. neighbors, for example, or small retailers. So we have wonderful stories which the newspaper and television programs amplify to show them how much small retailers are doing. For example, I mean, it just goes on. Some people are making the lotion from alcohol. People making, masks. What is done by the consumers is done by small retailers, volunteers. So to me, showing that additional dimension going beyond profit motive becomes very key strategic asset for the small retailers.
We are talking of retail moving into more advanced value-added services today. But to what extent, Professor, is the Indian ecosystem supporting this cause? Because if you look at the regulatory issues, I think that they come across as quite complex. There are different rules for single brand retail. There are different rules for multi-brand retail. Different rules for supermarkets, for departmental stores, for brick and mortar, for online. So how do you think the ecosystem can actually come together and provide the much needed encouragement for the retail, physical retail in India?
I think quite often, well, before all that, first of all, retail is regulated everywhere. Okay. For example, we have health agencies in charge of all of the restaurants. Whether your meat is, not contaminated, etc. It's properly stored, it's properly served, etc. So we have more regulation than India, please, for public safety laws. We have similarly regulations by the agricultural, the USDA, as it is called, US Department of Agriculture, for anything that is edible products. We have regulation by Food and Drug Administration, very large scale. In fact, today you have a lot of complaints going on that there are too much regulation. Despite this crisis, how they will manage the crisis? They are relaxing the regulations. I think regulation is much more in advanced countries than actually in emerging markets. So we have to change our paradigm to say it's not the regulation, but something else. Second thing is that the only way you can reform the in the regulatory debate and discussions. You cannot bribe your way out. Our tendency in India is to say, let me pay off the money to the politician so it will be more favorable. Everybody does lobbying. We do lobbying also. Our lobbying is open. It's transparent. One of the biggest lobbying company would be Walmart, for example, for their interest, and they know which politician will go along. We have the gun law lobbying, for example. NRA is a big lobby. They want to make sure they protect the gun business. It's very common. My recommendation is that rather than doing that, can you participate in shaping the legislation itself? Because the legislation in India is done by people who have no business background generally. They're either economists or they're engineers or scientists, and they really don't understand the profit motive at all. They think profit motive is not good for the society. It's not an either or. To me, public interest and private interest are really two peas in a pod. They're highly interdependent. Somehow, whoever created the dichotomy historically by culture or modern capitalism probably made the biggest mistake. The private sector cannot serve the public interest. So I have a book called The Forms of Endearment with Raj Sisodia, and that book is a runaway success. Raj has coined, along with other people, actually Whole Foods founder, what is called the conscious capitalism. We are able to show that companies that serve their community, their customers and their employees and their suppliers better, actually, they're more profitable. So economists came out with the wrong idea, and I don't know where it came from. I don't know, sort of trace it back. But to me, active participation in shaping the regulation, if regulation is created right, the legislation, then people, it is coming out, it is not enforceable. People will rebel against it no matter what regulation. I think in retailing, that is the key difference. I will add one more thing around here, which is very different than what you think. What I find fascinating is that, I don't know, whatever reason why we are so afraid of company like Walmart, Carrefour, Alibaba, doesn't make any difference. If Walmart comes to India, as an example, I'll tell you, Walmart is the largest seller of diamonds in America and the largest in long. Nobody comes close to Indian diamond making. It's a very large export commodity, by the way. As good movies, for example, not as big as the IT services, but it is pretty significant. So export in on that product. Diamonds, and will now can sell it to Mexico, which is the same culture as ours, Canada, and China. Walmart will do better job in India, not to sell in India, but to identify suppliers. My view is that Walmart will create easily at least 250,000 new manufacturers. It's such a huge buying power globally. Any brand that goes to Walmart sells well, including their own brands for that matter. This is true for Costco, which is a physical retailer. And I think retailers are there for sourcing. And everybody wants an alternative to China right now for regular products. So I can make products in India. And by the way, it did happen surprisingly to all of us during Diwali season. And there's a huge Indian diaspora, at least 20 million or so. Do we celebrate Diwali in America or in England or in Canada or wherever we are, as you celebrate, obviously? The mithai wala, there were 50,000 merchants easily who sold their mithai through Amazon platform outside the country. So we have to look upon these retailers in a different light. They are not just selling merchandise, which is not a bad idea even, because they will bring in world-class branded products which are good quality, and therefore India will aspire to have a higher quality. To me, all of these are advantages for India as a nation. An industry can learn how to compete properly. Okay? Last comment about retailing in this area. In India, like many unorganized sectors, we have a very large unorganized sector, especially in trade and retailing. Unorganized, unbranded products. My estimate is that there are 9 steps involved from the time somebody produces, manufactures it. And at each time, trader involved, a middleman has invested housing and finance. They do. They have their margins. Margins are pretty high when you combine all of them. So as an organized retailer, one is to drop from 9-step distribution to maybe about 2-step or 3-step distribution, which can only happen with a worldwide, with a large retailer like Big Bazaar, for example, or Futures Group in general. I think we need to invite more of those retailers, no matter where they come from. Our anxiety about the colonial powers taking over, exploiting, those days are gone. Today, if you go to England, among the FTSE 500, their top 500 companies, none of them, very few are owned by the British. Jaguar brand, Land Rover brand, world-class brands are owned by Tata Motors. But no British have rebelled in the street to say, how come a former colony own our brands or icons of the world? Ownership does not matter. Who serves the nation matters more. I'm a very strong advocate that we need to disassociate our mindset about saying who owns the brands or who owns the company, essentially. I mean, I can give you an example. Hindustan is a pretty good corporation in India. I don't think many Indians feel like it's a typical multinational here to exploit and take all the profits out. You can feel the same feeling you can say about Nestle. No? Me, I think we have to change our mindset about in the retailing field. Strongly should invite large global retailers because they have more the capacity and existing infrastructure to take the Indian brands all over. Such a long conversation. the soft power of a nation is no longer just culture, heritage, religion, etc. It is the brands. Japan taught us lessons by investing in branding, and people admired Japan. Nobody knew Japanese much before that one. They were low quality. Soft power of Korea is its brands today, not its system, cultural system, political system they have. Samsung brand, LG brands, they are worldwide admired, and you admire Korea. I think nation's soft power is more anchored to their products and brands and the quality of the products and brands, as Germany has done, as Sweden has done, as America did at one time. So I think we have to think retailing sector. I'll stop here. It's a too long an answer.
Right. So would you like to take the next question?
Yes. This one is again related to consumer behavior when they purchase online, typically related to Indian consumers. We have seen that the payment patterns are mainly people opt for cash on delivery instead of paying online. So I have two thoughts in mind. It could be either due to a trust deficit to pay to the company online before receiving the product, or Indians typically maybe want to touch and feel the product before paying up for that product. So is this going to impact the sustainability of e-commerce in India, or I think we will have to focus on changing the buyer behavior and make him pay online upfront. So what is the way forward?
This is a problem also in America, a very big one. Before the online, we had a very large business called mail order. In other words, you wrote, for example, Sears had a very large mail order. The biggest one was JCPenney, which is struggling right now. Their returns were 25%. We are very liberal in return policies. They even pay for the return freight. So what you have to do is that if people are doing this because they're not satisfied with the product, or they're exploiting the marketer, which is always a strong possibility, like I can get the garment, use it, for example. I can use the shoes for an occasion and returning back. We have all kinds of incidences that consumers exploit the marketer rather than marketer exploiting the consumers. So in those cases, you have to keep track. There are chronic returners versus occasional returners. People who buy and always return. If that's the case, you can segment and isolate them, for example. It's very possible. You can have some fees charged for return. In America, we are much easier. I mean, I can return with no qualms at all, and the marketer or the retailer accepts that. I think they are learning now to say, how can you put certain bump road, to return primarily. You have to pay a return, for example, shipping cost. And we don't give you the packaging for return. So I think in India, the same thing will happen, that eventually agree, just like what happened with the cell phones. We started with prepaid cell phones. So we do not have the infrastructure in place for credit card and payment systems. So people bought prepaid. Now it is all postpaid more and more. I think the same thing will happen in retailing, that you charge it to your prepaid cell phone. It's a great technology, fortunately, for the masses. And I can do quite a lot of things with those. But I do believe that the marketers will learn, or retailers will learn, to minimize the cost of COD.
Asha?
Professor, you were mentioning the fact that it's not the ownership of the brands that matter. It's the one who is the face of the customer, who understands the customer's requirements and can relate to his needs. That's what matters more, and rightfully so. You were also mentioning about how India should be welcoming players like Walmart, who can actually make it a big success for several of the Indian brands. But just going back to the concept of the ecosystem that's required to make these a big success, to what extent do you think Indian logistics is prepared to handle these kind of volumes? What do you think should happen, or what are the areas of improvement that India should look at as an ecosystem to be able to attract players like Walmart to be getting more active in their retail businesses? It's
a question. The biggest hurdles in having retail get a lot bigger online or physical even is the logistics. And there are several components of the logistics. Probably the biggest component of the logistics in India for foreign export markets are the seaports. We don't have enough. We have a huge coastline, but no, government has not invested. Usually it will be through public-private partnerships of some sort. How do we build more ports at smaller locations? So we just don't have the Kandala and Mundra ports, for example, or Bombay port, or Calcutta or Madras, but we can easily have 20 ports created. More and more cargo is shipped out, not as much by sea route within the country or outside the country from one coast to the other, but it is by air now. More and more cargo is shipped out by air, but we don't have enough airports in smaller towns. It's not for passenger as much as for cargo. So that's the other thing primarily. So the more we build the infrastructure for airports, seaports, the better off we are. I think that is clearly one bottleneck. We are improving our road system quite a lot, pretty much. Roads are being built more and more, especially in some states. They look just like any modern roads any place. And trucks are there. Our trucks are still not there. Still have the old stockpile of old trucks. And how do we modernize the trucks by law? It cannot happen by private sector. It's all financing business, ultimately. The lorry wala does not own the lorry. It's some financier who finances, and he has no interest in changing the stock. The only thing you can do, like Singapore has done, you cannot have a car of 4 years or 5 years old or something like that. One has to do, and that's very important that in India, one has to pass a law to say, this is good for the environment anyhow. These old trucks are just not acceptable. And how do you implement that law on a national level so that you have more modern trucks, which are more efficient, for example, and therefore the logistics can be improved. And the last part is in India, what is missing is cold storage, not just storage. Products that require refrigeration or something cooling, perishable commodities in general. Definitely on the meat side, quite a lot you need cold storage. Cold storage allows longer life between the time you produce it or create it and the time you consume it or sell it. And that's the other thing. So I do agree that it's important, which is why you saw Amazon announcing that they would invest massively in creating their own infrastructure, as they are doing here, surprisingly. In fact, this morning, the announcement I saw before our webinar is that Jeff Bezos says, I will do my own testing for coronavirus for my employees. I've got the scientists, I've got the test. I don't want to rely on the government. They are so large in scale. They can do it. And he already hired 100,000 new employees in 2 months, and he still needs additional 75,000 employees. And of course, they don't want employees without having the testing, because otherwise you have the epidemic, or a pandemonium, it happened right there, right? Pretty much on your location. You have all the legal issues and all the stuff. So my view is that I think large retailers have capability of doing that. But you can have a private capital coming. I'm very optimistic about India. You will not shake my optimism, okay?
No, I think we should, because retail in India is a huge contributor to the economy, right? Both directly and indirectly. Not just in terms of direct employment, but also indirect GDP contributions. I think I read that it's the 4th largest globally after UK, US, and China.
Yeah.
You were mentioning about the COVID-19 crisis earlier on, and even pre-crisis, Indian economy was facing a slowdown, and it was badly hurting the retail sector. I think the crisis has only worsened. So how do you think we can revive consumer demand in the retail space quickly enough and re-trigger the economy? We may have had a huge setback in the last few weeks. So what do you think are the 2 or 3 areas where India should be looking at to revive the retail space?
Oh, definitely. I do agree. India is very fortunate to have almost a universal cell phone technology-based networks on which I can do transactions quite a lot. Even with small mom and pop shops, with the GST coming in, now they all have cash transaction machines out there. Any place I go in India, I feel every machine is out there for my debit card, for example. Let's just keep, there are several, but that's clearly one. India also has an Aadhaar platform, which means I can pump money in the hands of the end consumer, so he or she does not have the money obstacle to buy products, right? At least that can be done. Main thing, in my view, is that retailing has to quickly go even more aggressively toward online transactions. In other words, you survive as a company, but your store can be used for something else, okay? It's omni-channel, as we call it in some fashion. And it is happening, for example, in America right now. Macy's stores is one of the largest retailers in America, department store-wise. All shut down, but they're still serving the public by online. In other words, I can order the merchandise and I get it at home or wherever I want it to be shipped out. We have a platforms for that in India. I mean, Flipkart has done it.
Yes.
You know, Big Basket you mentioned is doing it. Amazon is doing it. We have to expand that and encourage that rather than resist that for immediate survival. Because consumers have the demand, but suppliers properly. So that's clearly one I would recommend, using technology as fast as you can. Product retailers, to some extent, service retailers, anything that's digitized or could be digitized can go on. That's not a problem. Anything that's physical would require this logistics online support. So that's clearly one recommendation. Second recommendation is surprisingly to consolidate a little more. This is a time where it may be that smaller retailers cannot survive. So how do you consolidate? Which is a key challenge in India because most retailers are family-owned businesses, multi-generational. So they are looking at what's the livelihood of the next person who is the owner earning money from that retail. Maybe this is the time where you say, I don't need 3 sons to run 3 shops. Can I combine into one shop, one son or one daughter nowadays, and can the others do other things? We did that in the agriculture sector, when in agriculture, you did not need as many manpower because we used machines. They were sent to the cities to work. As it happens in India, many rural population comes to the cities because there's a surplus in rural, in agricultural economy. I think our retailers have to think like that. How do I consolidate my operations? Last thing is much more interesting in the sense that we have too much inventory generally. Money is tied up in inventory quite a lot in retail. How do we unlock that money from that retail by however I can sell it, those merchandise, rather than the traditional way where I just wait for the consumer to come to my shop. I'll be waiting, consumer is not able to come, or is not willing to come, whatever it is. I think one has to think, which means basically yesterday I gave an interview here in America where I said, if the consumer cannot come to the retailer, can retailer go to the consumer? Many places, very possible. We are finding they are becoming much more entrepreneurial. So that's one more area. And the last area is very important. I think it may be this multi-generational retail is not the future for you specifically. Can you think about diversifying into something else? Now, there's a history about large Indian enterprises. If you go back to the Birla Group, if you go back to Wipro even for that matter, when they were in Vanaspati business, they were all trading companies. If you go back to Reliance, for example, the founder was a trader. And they found trading is not the future, manufacturing is the future. So a good retailer can easily go into manufacturing so long as they have the cash or family assets to invest into that one. Very possible. So as large companies have done the migration, like Wipro did from Vanaspati to branded products like Santur, for example, whatever they did, they went into manufacturing. Their children studied engineering, primarily how do you manufacture world-class products. All of them did that thing. So from primarily trading, how do you go into manufacturing, for example? Or how do you go into providing support services? You don't have to be a retailer, but I know I can provide support service. For example, I can be their logistics arm. I can be their warehousing arm or something like that. There are so many options. Problem is that in many ways, small mom and pop retailing is what a lifestyle business. This is what happens to insurance agents. They collect annuity after annuity because there's a loyalty by the multi-generational, as I grew up, for example, and therefore they become complacent till a crisis arises. So fortunately, there's a good saying to say, there is a fortune in misfortunes. Time that might be very good to think about what else can I do now. If you're an entrepreneur, you always think about something else anyhow.
Very interesting. Sid, should we start taking questions? I think there are many coming along.
Yes, Ash. So shall I read out some interesting questions which I was able to pick up?
Sure.
Yeah. So there is one question raised by Mr. Abhishek Datta from NIT University.
Yeah.
What roles do you see shopping malls which are not faring well currently in India? What could they play in the next generation retailing in India? So that's the question.
Excellent question. Because shopping malls are even much greater problem than the retailers who rent in the shopping malls. In general, there seems to be one direction worldwide that shopping malls will become more and more service malls or recreation malls. That infrastructure is valuable in terms of parking, location. I mean, our shopping malls have huge parking lots. And therefore, rather than sell merchandise or invite retailers who sell merchandise, can you invite professional services, for example, and become service malls? Or become the place for all of the recreational activities, sports, athletics, for example, tennis courts, indoor, squash, table tennis. Think about all this stuff that can be done. It's relatively easy because that infrastructure is very valuable. The last thing which is happening already is that many shopping malls, the value is somewhat in the building, but buildings have become obsolete after 15, 20 years, and therefore no regulation, new regulations they cannot meet, etc. So what they're doing is to sell the land, which now becomes high-rise apartment complexes, as we call them, or condominiums. Biggest change happening in America, where shopping mall centers, if they're not indoor malls, have become more and more communities within the town because they're located in the city. People don't want to commute so far away from the city, and therefore they're all becoming as a condominiums or sort of the place where you eat there, you live there, you shop there, and the only time you get out is for work, and that's it pretty much. And in fact, we think eventually work will come to those locations. Things are becoming more and more remote working by and large. So yes, the shopping malls retail value if they transform into service malls, recreation malls, or transform into condominiums.
Right. So there's one more question from Mr. Sushant Tomar from Graphic Era University, Dehradun. He wants to know what would be the future of agro products in online retailing.
The future of agro products is very bright on online retailing. For example, one of my friends from his MBA class here at Guzweta School actually has 10,000 farmers who grow organic farm products, and he exports out to large retailers all over the world. There's Sainsbury or something in England, or food in France, for example, the demand. So agricultural products, even though they're perishable, are now more shipped by air cargo. Just to give you some examples, which is fascinating. We used to import in America a lot of flowers, especially rose flowers. Mostly came from a country called Colombia nearby. Most of the perishable commodities come by freight, air freight nowadays. Today, India competes them all the way from India, selling maybe very competitive for the Americans. So agricultural commodities have more future, surprisingly, than we thought. All it needs is a little more packaging, either by a middleman who says, I'll buy in bulk, but I'll package it. People don't have to do additional work at home. There is no more servant available today in big cities. Nobody wants to work as a maid or something in the house, because that used to be good support. And today everyone's working, so they have no time. So the question is, can you do the value add? So I pre-packaged subsidies or vegetables. I can have pre-packaged tomatoes. I don't have to do additional value add work at home and make it more convenient. That business is very viable. And the last one is surprisingly, agricultural products can create in India, advocating more processing done in a region. So you do more processing, you do more branding. Potato chips, it's already happening. You see now regional brands competing with Frito-Lay. Potato chips made in Gujarat, for Gujarati kind of a taste. Potato chips made in Tamil Nadu for Tamil taste, or Bengali taste. Each one of has different taste in India. It's a great, great market for agricultural products to localize, because markets are big anyhow, and come out with branded agricultural products, either raw materials, vegetables, fruits, etc., or in fact come out with processed value-add manufactured things.
Yeah, Sushant, I hope that answers.
In snacks, it's very.
Yeah. So there is one question from Mr. Adiraj Baduri. He says, gradually we have seen some online stores have started setting up physical stores and adopting the conventional way. Example, Lenskart. Why so? Does it mean they are losing confidence in online trade?
No, I don't think it's losing confidence. It is primarily to make delivery mechanisms better. In other words, as you compete on delivery time, from the time you order to deliver, there's a race going now between brick and mortar stores, who can deliver in a day, half a day, 4 hours. Online people don't have the systems in place. So the easiest thing is to use your local supermarket. As an example, Amazon buys out Whole Foods, not only for all of the brand names Whole Foods has in the supplier relationship, which opens up huge sort of new products, which they did not have high margin products, but Whole Foods stores can become your local warehouses. You have the big trucks take you out, and then each supermarket that you own becomes a warehouse. So basically you distribute logistics to a local small mini warehouses in many ways, where you already have a customer base, so it sustains and you can do delivery from there. So to me, that's very logical. Now, that's one side. On the other hand, if you are a very specialty product like Apple, and similarly Apple-like products, where you need a lot of consultative selling. The customer comes not as much with knowledge about the product, because every new model is very different. Hardware, software, even a feel, see, touch. They are going to come out where primarily what they offer is the experience, as we call, but technical knowledge. And I'll give you two quick examples. Apple is doing that quite a lot. And Apple is very successful in each store you start. Usually crowds hang around there to make an appointment to meet the technical person, what they call genius. Best Buy is a physical store that has been not only delivering, but they bought a company called Geek Squad, I think it's called. They're all technical people, and they can install things for you at home. They give you, again, maintenance stuff. So to me, the more physical they create, the more value-added services they will be able to offer, which they cannot do in a remote place.
Great. Thank you, sir. Sir, if you permit, can I take two more questions from the participants?
Sure, I'm fine. I have set aside some time, yes.
Sure. So this is from Anmol Sharma from Symbiosis Institute of Business Management, Hyderabad. So he says, In a place like India, where the retail is extremely fragmented, how do you think we will be able to implement this model of value-added services all across India, where organized retail is just setting in? Is there a way we can incorporate a humanless retail in not so organized sectors of retailing in tier 2 and 3 cities? So that's the question from Anmol.
Yeah. Yeah, I think without human touch, there will be stores experimental in the beginning, probably in metropolitan areas where you have educated people who are very comfortable with technology. So I can think about IT centers, Bangalore, or parts of Bombay, Delhi, or Pune, for example, Chennai, where in that IT community itself, you offer a retail store which is just like Amazon Go. It's very possible in India. Fortunately, because there's some technology, good network, and it can be done completely. All the transactions are done with no human being in, except in fact the system primarily. So I think it can be done in those areas. I would put those stores primarily where these communities live. Either as paying guests, there are some locations where they're all congregated. Just like Bollywood is congregated in some parts of Bombay. For example, Gurgaon is famous for something like startup businesses. Bangalore, of course, is a startup. So I would identify where the tech center lies primarily, because they're techies. They're very comfortable. They like technology. So I would have in those places start stores with no human touch and add more technology. They like technology. In fact, in one of my recommendations, I have made very interesting other things like a futures group people have, or supermarket kind of stuff. Then you can literally build arcades where you play electronic games. People like to go someplace to play the games rather than play from home, for example. They like the competition, bowling alley, bowling, for example. But this is a game in that when they come, they can consume other products or they can buy products. It's one-stop shop in many regards. So there are all kinds of inventive ways a retailer will survive in India. My in India is very simple. We have so many festivals. If Flipkart can do so well on the festival, if Alibaba can do so well in one-day sale for your personal gift, I mean, you have dollars out of nowhere with people who are just middle income at best in China. They're not very affluent, and still they generate the business. I think we can do the same thing in India. Very possible to festivals. And if one, America is famous for inventing festivals out of religious. I mean, at Christmas sale, out with Thanksgiving, we come out with Easter, we come out with now just is Valentine's Day. Have you seen how multi-billion-dollar business marketers have created Valentine's Day? It's not there. We just have to imagine the excitement so people go beyond just convenience. The product is now bundled into an event or a destination. It's very possible.
Right. One last question. This is from Dr. Sunil Deshpande. He says, how do you compare retailing in pharmaceutical industry in the US as compared to that in India? Do you think there is a place for online pharma retailing here?
Very good question. Pharmacy tradition in India comes from our European heritage, more Germanic, surprisingly, than the British, where the pharmacy is a apothecary, as they call it, which means it's a place where you only sell pharmaceutical product over the counter, but primarily prescription, and the person in charge there almost has not only knowledge, but sometimes the authority to prescribe like a doctor would do, like a para doctor, medical, very knowledgeable. Think about the same thing in Ayurvedic shops. In Ayurvedic shops, the person in charge of the shop was the expert on Ayurvedic. I mean, he knew the stuff. He knew how to mix things. That's a pharma product also, if you think about that. I think that's coming back in some fashion. In America, what we did was to have the pharmacy primarily start with over-the-counter products more and more, because they did not require regulation as much, primarily as much, because there'll be prescription of certain drugs, especially painkillers now. It became very much a smart. I think it's combining the two. In many ways, good pharma can expand into non-pharma products, as our done that clearly. Our petrol stations today don't make money on petrol at all, but they make money on convenience store right there, because you are there, so you buy, things or potato chips or whatever it is. I think pharma can do that too. Pharma is very, very important in India for one reason: the consumer insurance company for pharma products. It is out of the pocket, and in India has so many for ordinary people. Diabetes is everywhere. So you have to pay for that diabetic drug, etc. So pharma is a very good local business, as Ayurveda was, which is Patanjali has taken and organized in incredible way. I just admire how much Patanjali has become such a large enterprise on Ayurvedic, which was there as a business, but they did not run it or organize it and branded it properly. Pharma is good view.
Should we close?
Asha? Yeah.
Yeah. So apologies that we could not take all of the questions, but this is the best that we could do in the given time. Professor, awesome insights, both international and national perspectives for us. I tried to make a list of takeaways, but the list was becoming endless. So I stopped there. Instead, I decided to focus on key 5 topics that retailers can focus on if they want to stay ahead of the curve. 1, unbundling of the services and providing value-added services. 2, reinvent financing, because that's a core element of retail space. 3, relook at the supply chain and try to minimize the time of delivery and also the storage facilities. 4, logistics and infrastructure, both in terms of seaports and airports, to be looked at. And finally, digitization. Make good use of what technology offers to get yourself a competitive edge at the end of the day. Those were the takeaways that I could summarize. Thank you so much for your valuable time. I'm sure the audience have benefited immensely. So have we. We were very privileged to have you. Thank you so much, Professor.
Thank you, Asha. Thank you, Sid.